Well, Patrick, kind of a late bye week for the Bears. Did you get a chance to do some self scouting of your own for your weekend off?
Yeah, on the beach, far, far away from here, actually. My wife and kid absolutely hated that the bye week was week 12 or whatever it is. But believe me, they appreciated it when it was 25 degrees here and 80 where we were.
Yeah, I believe it. Well, now that explains the tan that I'm looking at. I just Google searched because I couldn't remember exactly when Matt Eberflus said that he thinks that they've turned a corner, or that they were turning a corner, and I found an article from you after the Saints game. It was Saints week in that loss, but they are 4-4 in their last 8. Do you see anywhere that it looks like Eberflus may have been somewhat accurate that the Bears are turning somewhat of a corner?
Defensively, absolutely. I think their defense is a top half of the league defense right now, if not better than that. There was a time at the beginning of the year when they couldn't stop anybody. They couldn't get a pass rush. Now their pressure rate is really good. They're not blitzing as much as they had to in the past, and that plays into the strengths of their defense. They've had 8 takeaways the last 2 games. That's absurd. That is, by the way, nothing that they can repeat going forward. I think there's a good amount of luck in there, but when you're only bringing 4 and you can drop 8, the ball, finds you somehow. I think the defense is not only proof that they're getting better, but it's proof that the thing that Matt Eberflus is best at is what the team is best at right now.
Yeah, it sounds like they should keep their defensive coordinator. I don't know if they're going to keep their head coach, which is kind of a precarious situation. Where do you come out on Matt Eberflus, his job security? It's one of those things where I do wonder, is the frustration surrounding the Bears loud enough where we kind of force upon that there's this major decision coming, where inside the building they're like, well, what are people talking about? Of course, Matt Eberflus is going to be the head coach next year. What's your read on that?
I think they want to see what he does in the next 5 games. I also want to see what he does in the next 5 games. There's a world where they can go, they could go 4-1 the rest of the way. And now all of a sudden you're looking at kind of being on the cusp of the playoffs. You're being undoubtedly better than you were last year record-wise, and you've got some momentum going. Now, the big picture reason why you don't do that is as follows. If the Bears end up with number 1 or number 2 in the draft by way of the Panthers, they're probably going to draft a quarterback. And if you do that, you might want to pair him with a coach who's on the same timeline and with a coach whose expertise is in offense. The last 2 times the Bears have drafted a quarterback high, whether it was Mitch Trubisky or Justin Fields, they fired their head coach after a year. And then you kind of have to start over again. And the fear, if you keep Eberflus now, is if it doesn't work out next year, you're doing the exact same thing with another quarterback. So I think the temptation to pair, the number 1 or number 2 pick with somebody, with a coach who's going to be here for a while is pretty great. Now, that said, if Eberflus has got their defense playing really well, and if the Bears offense is good enough to win these games, and if Justin Fields looks okay, I think there's a world the Bears could talk themselves into keeping Eberflus and making a decision on Luke Getsy, kind of depending on how the way things look here. I just find it hard to believe that if they can get Caleb Williams, I find it hard to believe they wouldn't go do that.
Eberflus is still rather new at being a head coach. Have you watched him improve on the job this year? Could you make a case at all at things that he's gotten better at? Or is it just he's gotten the defense better and it's helped them beat some not very good teams that they played?
Yeah, that's true. He's gotten the defense better. It helps that he's gotten better players. They trade for Montez Sweat, give up a lot, and then pay him a lot of money, and he's made a really big impact. They go out and sign Tremaine Edmonds, who I think has been up and down this year, but he is better than anybody they had last year. You've got a defensive backfield that's healthy with Jalen Johnson and with Kyler Gordon and with Tyreek Stevenson at corner. Those corners are really good. It's been Eberflus, but it's also been, the players kind of growing into the system. Where I'd like to see Eberflus grow the rest of the way is I think he needs to relax a little bit. It's easy for me to sit here and easy for me to say. Right. But the last couple of weeks in his interactions with us, I think you've seen him a little more of himself. You've seen him not trying to tell us that Justin Fields is both out and doubtful, or doubtful and questionable, or whatever that word salad was before the Saints game. You've seen him try to loosen up a little bit publicly, and I think that's good. He's had opportunities this year that he's missed. I think that would have helped him in getting the public to go along with him. I always point to Chase Claypool. Nobody in town liked Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool had never done anything to help the Bears, and all he'd done was be frustrating to the fan base. Eberflus could have come out and been really firm about him and said, listen, this guy's out of here. I do not put up with stuff like this. And I think Bears fans would have loved it. And he didn't. He just kind of said, well, he's not in the stadium, and then maybe we told him not to come, but no, not really. Then he stayed away on his own, and then no, we told him not to come. He was just so wishy-washy about it publicly. Behind closed doors, he was different. But I think what the fan base has been looking for all year is reasons to kind of wrap their arms around the guy. And I don't think they found it. And, maybe, I was joking with somebody the other day. We've never seen him on a winning streak, ever. So maybe winning a couple of games loosens everybody up, the fan base and him alone. But they've still got to do that. They've got the Lions coming up. I think the Lions are the one really good team left on their schedule, and it might be his last chance to have a signature win.
Carolina Panthers have a 68% chance of landing the number one overall pick, which means the Bears have a 68% chance of landing the number one overall pick. I lean towards the Bears making a change at the quarterback position. I felt like the way that they started the season of wanting more of a traditional pocket passer showed us, and that's from Ryan Poles on down, showed us about who they wanted as a quarterback, and they wanted to see if Fields could do that. This is, the $1 million question, one that you've been covering, one that you've been writing about. Where do you come out on, are there any tea leaves that we can read about the decision that the Bears look to be making at the quarterback position?
They're going to give him the last 5 games, I think, before making any great pronouncements. I look at it as this. It's like the Baseball Hall of Fame. You know a Hall of Famer when you see one. And it's never, we can sit there and debate, is this guy a Hall of Famer for months? And all it comes down to is when you hear the name, do you go, yes or no? When I ask you, do you see it with Justin? Yes or no? Just right now. Nobody would say yes. Nobody. You have to convince yourself of it. And if you have to talk yourself into it, I think you know the answer. I think it's pretty apparent. To me, the more interesting question becomes, what happens if the Panthers win a couple games? Then it's not Caleb Williams or Justin Fields. Then maybe it's number 2 or Justin Fields or number 3 or Justin Fields. Then I think you could have a really healthy debate about whether that's worth trading. For Ryan Poles, and I don't know how many Bears fans want to hear this, Ryan Poles may have made the greatest trade in the history of the NFL. Completely. Straight up, no hyperbole. There is a world in which he traded the number 1 pick last year for the number 1 pick this year and a boatload of stuff, including his best wide receiver, Darnell Wright, a second-round pick this 2 years from now, and a second-round pick last year. That is just highway robbery to get Caleb Williams, who's a much better player than Bryce Young is. Would he want to try and do that again? I think that's a worthy question if they were drafting number 2. I think Caleb Williams, in my mind, is so much better than Drake May, and for 2 years has been the slam dunk best college player in the world of draft nicks, at least. I just don't think you can say no to that.
Speaking of, Caleb Williams was in the news quite a bit back in September. And really, I think it was more of things that his dad had said. And I'm sure that as we get into draft season, there will be a lot of discussion about Caleb Williams and his dad. And, it was about, could he go back to college because he didn't like the team that he was going to go to at number 1. But this is not the worst team in the NFL picking a player who is at number 1 if the Panthers land there and the Bears end up getting it. What sort of roster do you think, how would you grade the roster of if the Bears choose a quarterback at number 1 overall? What kind of situation are they coming into? Because in my opinion, I think it's much better than you could see in a lot of previous years where typically the worst team takes the best quarterback. I don't think that's at all the case here. And I think Caleb Williams, if he is going to the Bears, I think it's a very good, not very good, I think it's a good situation.
I think that what's disappointing about this season is that in many ways the roster is better than the record. And I think it's been a while since you've been able to say that. We sat through the rebuild last year. We sat through the rebuild in most of the John Fox era. And when we sat there and saw, the Bears win 4 or 5 games, you go, man, it's about right. This year, I don't think it is. I mean, you could argue the Bears are 2 plays away from having 6 wins instead of 4, and we'd be in a much different position here. So I still think the Bears roster is probably at the top of the bottom third of the league. I mean, they have a long way to go, but they are not in the absolute doldrums here. They are not. I mean, look at New England. New England, if they were to draft a quarterback, would still need to surround him with 4 offensive skill players, maybe everybody but Ramondre Stevenson. You look at the Panthers, obviously they're not going to draft a quarterback, but their roster is just decimated, and in part because of Brian Poles. The Cardinals have a couple of pieces. I mean, if you look at the list of the worst teams, the Bears have better players than most of the worst teams. Now, that's no reason to throw a parade, but that is a reason to be excited about pairing a really good quarterback with those guys.
Patrick, thanks for doing this. Finish strong. 5 games left to go, huh?
Got to run through the tape, and then either my life gets a lot less hectic or more hectic, depending on what happens. And that's the real intrigue here, is how it's going to affect me in January.
Thanks, Patrick.
Anytime.